This is Earth Soul Medicine, a space for spirituality, connection, and next-level nourishment. This is part 2 of a 2-part episode. If you missed last week's part 1, be sure to check it out on Spotify or the Earth Soul Medicine YouTube channel. Enjoy part 2.
Because I had been afraid for a while. I had talked to a therapist previously who was like, I don't do EMDR. I feel like you can do it wrong. And I've seen people have their traumas like get stuck in their body. And I was like, what? And there were some red flags with this guy before, and I ended up not seeing him because I was like, I don't know. And the woman I'm seeing now is like, no. She was like, that's not a thing. Like, you shouldn't be afraid of that. But she was like, trauma does live in your body, which was made popular by The Body Keeps the Score, that information. And so, like, when you go, I don't know if you experienced this, but she was telling me when she does it for clients and when she had it done to herself, she experienced a physical trigger of the trauma. And she was like, you would go through a cycle of that, like that would keep happening for a little bit during the session, and then, you know, on the come down, basically everything returns to normal. And then you process afterwards. She described her experience as like a 2-hour situation. And I know they do the EMDR with the lights for the eyes, but she does it with a vibrating thing that you hold, which will activate the two lobes of your brain that are activated during trauma that usually shut off when you're overloaded. So those are the parts of your brain that shut off, which allowed you not to process your trauma.
Right.
So they activate them together in the safe space of therapy, and then she triggers you by telling you or talking about it so that your brain is able to process it, and your body will have like the release of that in whatever way that it does. And then she described that people a lot of the times would have their repressed memories up here.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh, I'm not excited for that. But then she described it as life-changing. She was like, I went through it. It was terrible for like the time that it happened, and that night I had nightmares to further process. And then she was like, I didn't experience the symptom I had done it for afterwards.
Wow.
I was like, whoa! I was like, sign me up!
Yeah.
And she was talking about how she was like, I want to do this for my phobia of needles. And I was like, we can do this for phobias of stuff? Because I got bees on there. I was like, I want to do mine for a phobia of bees.
Wow.
And like a bunch of other stuff.
I had no idea what the potential of this was.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm like, now I'm going to feel like a big doof if I'm not thinking of the same thing we're talking about. But the way it happened for me was like, we were talking about memories of when I was 13, and she held up like a stick, like a magic wand, like a back scratcher, somewhere between a magic wand and a back scratcher. And it was just like, look at this, and then like would move it certain ways.
Yes.
And like got me to like lock in my eyes and then keep talking about the things that were traumatic. And it was wild how it just like could unlock. It was just like opening a door to all these memories and feelings that I just was like, what? That's inside me? I cried a lot. I don't remember there being another physical expression so much, but that stuff really is stored inside you. I have a friend who's got a healing gift of doing this thing of unlocking trapped emotions in your body. Have you experienced this? There's like, boy, I don't know how to name what this practice is, but it's a thing because she has like this book that's got all these codes, and she'll tap into, you know, the consciousness, and then she will like ask questions, yes or no, and it's kind of like a muscle testing thing, but it can be done quantumly, like over the phone, and then she can, you know, ask like, what is the feeling, and she'll get an answer that's something like 57, and that code corresponds to feeling abandoned. And then she'll be like, what age did that happen? Between 10 and 25? And then she'll like narrow it down and get yeses and nos, so that then the result will be like, when you were 14, you felt abandoned. And she'll like tell you this little like, you know, and you'll be like, oh, hell yeah, I did. I know exactly what that was. or you'll be like, I don't know that one. But then she'll like release it. And then you're at, I don't know. It's sometimes hard to articulate how you feel energy shift like that, right? But it's like, it's very real to me. I am 100% on board. It's really cool.
I wonder if they're gone forever. I wonder if they're like released forever, or if it builds back up.
I think that I think some things can be released forever, and sometimes it's like she usually does it in a way where she'll like ask like, what can we do now that would be helpful? And you know, before she goes to the next one, she'll be like, can we go further? Can we go further? Because at some point you can only do so much in one day. It's like you can only take so much off a plant in one day without shocking it, right? It's like you only want to do so much healing work at one time. And so I think depending on the severity of the wound, or like, you know, how many spirals you've carried it through, maybe how much it needs to be released. But the really cool thing is when she does it and she'll say like, actually, this was an emotion that was trapped for your dad or for your grandpa, and it's been passed down to you through your connection to them, and now I'm releasing it for you, which also releases it for them. It's pretty rad.
Yes. Ain't that the truth? Any healing work you do is for everyone.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
The quantum time, I like don't understand it at all, but I'm just I feel like it keeps coming up around me over and over again lately, how this idea of just like, I say it all the time as we're talking, like time doesn't exist. Like it's happening now, but it's happening all the time. And there's like, I am so like intrigued by the idea of other versions of ourselves in other timelines that exist like simultaneously, or like there's a couple different shows we've watched lately that touch on this topic of jumping from timeline to timeline. Like we watched OA, Original Angel, on Netflix maybe. It's really good, and they could become aware of their like quantum versions of themselves in other timelines and jump from one timeline to the next. And then I keep seeing that theme all over the place in media, which like tingles this little part of me that's like, there's some truth to this that I need to understand, you know, or that they want me to understand. I don't know. There's a nebulous line in there somewhere, but anyway, I don't know anything about how all that works, but I am fascinated by it.
Oh my God, me too. And I used to think, I love the idea of the time shift, because I was talking to a friend about like past life stuff, and just thinking of a past life as something that happened in the past, like our classic, like how like Gregorian time or whatever, like you just keep going down the line and there's a past, present, and future. But then I was challenged to think of all of these things happening at the same time. Like this is happening to me here now. And even though I'm perceiving something as a past life, it is happening to me here now because it hasn't been healed. It doesn't stop. It's still affecting you now. You still carry that with you in your energy.
Right.
So they're simultaneously happening on separate spirals that are somehow interconnected. And I was like, well, that's a mind F for real. I was like, I'm having a hard time grappling with that information. But also, I've been watching a lot of media that rewrites history. Where it's like, it's a new interpretation of a person who existed back when, or a time period, like Regency era, what that would look like if we rewrote that, you know? Because that's basically what Bridgerton is.
Right.
It's a rewriting of history. And then this awesome new show called My Lady Jane on Amazon Prime. I think you would really like it. But it rewrites the story of one of King Henry's wives. After 3 months of being married to him, he beheaded. It rewrites her life as she like does all of these amazing things, lives after him, becomes queen, and like it's fascinating. And I just think to myself, all we have to do is have a thought that becomes more than a thought to completely change our history, or what has been cataloged within our cells and our energy body as our history.
Wow.
Because every thought becomes... And I was just sitting there thinking like, wow, we're so powerful. And that's why I think that mental health and receiving services, mental health or behavioral services, is so important, because it teaches you how to be a master of your brain. Be able to control your thoughts and gain skills on how to control them. Because if you're able to do that, the amount of magic you're able to do is increased tenfold.
No doubt. No doubt about it. Yeah. It's interesting how we are all kind of doing that magic, whether we're conscious of it or not, right? Because whatever you're when you're upset and you're focused on what you don't want, like you're still creating.
Oh, yes.
Just the same.
All the things you don't want.
All the things you don't want.
Yes, it's so true. And when we took your conscious discipline class, and thinking about my child, and when I'm trying to redirect her behavior in a way that isn't focusing on what I don't want, like stop kicking me under the table, and then thinking about what I did want from her, it took me a while. It was like it took me a good 10 minutes to really think about, what do I want here? And then trying to articulate that to her. We've gotten better at that, for sure. But that's like, it's a skill that you don't have, and it takes a while to learn.
It's not how our culture sets us up to think at all. I watch people go through this over and over again, because I commonly lead an exercise with folks that's like, okay, tell me about the situation that's hard for you. And they vent for a while about all the things they hate about it. Yeah. And then I go, okay, so what do you want? And they vent for a while longer about all the things that they wish were different. And I go, okay, so what do you want? And we just keep going. And this is where I struggle as a teacher, because if you really want someone to learn the lesson, you could just keep asking, okay, so what is it that you want, until they come to that themselves, Yes. It's like, it's really hard for me to be patient enough to not be like, so it sounds like what you want is...
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. But it takes people many, many iterations to get to even be able to put their thoughts into that language. And it's like a muscle. When you strengthen it, you can become really good at thinking that way pretty quickly, actually, if you stay in your wise mind. But it's also not at all where most of us are coming from, at like status quo, It's like we all talk about this, common sense, like, we really, it's not very sensical what we think of as common sense, or just, where our bar is for how we hold our consciousness is so low. It's so low.
Yeah. And people fight hard to keep it that way.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the change, like, it's hard to change. People are uncomfortable with change. They're also afraid of things they don't know about. Maybe that's why. When
I was growing up, there was a sticker on the window above where you do the dishes. Maybe it's still there in my dad's house. It says, "The only constant is change." Yeah. And I am so appreciative that lesson was clear to me from a young age, because I actually really find that I enjoy change more than most other people around me. When things are changing, I'm like, this is exciting. Like, I know it's going to be hard, but like, if it's during change, you can kind of keep it in perspective that like, these are growing pains, it's not always going to be hard, but like, this is this moment while we're figuring this out, kind of a thing. Right. And like, I feel like just incredibly grateful that lesson was taught to me young, that I can hold that awareness about life, because I've watched other people just, man, when you sink your heels in against change, you lose sight of all the possible lessons that are, coming around the spiral at you. Like, it's a gift to be challenged and to have things change out of your control. It doesn't feel like it in the moment, but the sooner you can see it that way, you can start to reap the rewards. And it just makes life more fun.
Yes. Yes. That's true. I like that too. And it is like a willfulness, I feel like sometimes, especially within me. I'm like, no, I'm going to dig my heels in. No. And one of the skills they teach you is being willing, not willful. And I was like, okay. And then they talk about willing body posture, and they're like an open hands or half smiling. Half smiling is changing my life because my toddler will be having a rough go and I'm triggered. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to relax my face during this violent tantrum, and I'm gonna like try to half smile. And something about smiling, your brain is like, we're happy.
Fake it till you make it.
We're happy, yes. And I'm like, that's a real thing. That's so helpful.
It really is helpful.
Because then you're in an executive brain state, and you're like, okay, I can deal with this. And straight up, when you said your kids can't be in a different higher brain state than you, that is so the truth. Because as soon as I can get my crap together, it's over.
Yeah.
She's like totally fine. And I'm like, this is a miracle. This is magic.
That's the magic of the human brain. Like, that's co-regulation. Textbook co-regulation is like a child is depending on us because they don't have that skill of emotional regulation built yet, right? Like, they obviously didn't get to take the module that you're taking, and maybe not. They've gone to preschool. Like, you're not going to be the master of emotional regulation for a long time in your life. 3 and 4 is a very rudimentary version of emotional regulation because their brains are dependent as social creatures to turn to the people around them and have the adults model what that looks like in this situation, So when you shift your reality, it completely shifts their reality. That it's like it's the most amazing proof of how we're connected in an energetic way.
Yeah.
That is just like so plain to see how the way that your composure can affect a child or really anyone.
And
anyone else around you, young, old, professional or personal, like, if
stranger
anyone is
not.
dysregulated, and you can either like join in that chaos with them or hold that calm and, just like, and, just like validate and empathize, like,
yes,
it changes the whole energy.
Yeah, this is reminding me hardcore of like codependency. And like when you're like the child can't regulate themselves, and so there's co-regulation going on, and I'm thinking like, whoa, all the codependent relationships I have in my life where I can't regulate myself and they can't regulate themselves, and so we're just here doing this thing together trying to figure out how to co-regulate. Interesting stuff.
One thing we've worked on that has like monumentally changed our marriage is just simply recognizing when we both become dysregulated. Because often we're triggered by the other one being dysregulated.
Yes.
And then it just like quickly is like a fire, the fire feeds itself. It's like just explodes out of control. Like, we go from like the tiniest of misunderstandings to like the hugest fight in 2 seconds flat. When you look back on it, you're like, what was even? Oh, I was upset that you weren't holding space for you were having big feelings about my big feelings. How dare you?
Yes, Chelsea, we're having the same exact experience.
And so what we've worked on is just, and we still don't get it right, but it has shifted the way we fight fair in a huge way to be like, let's just stop right now because we're both triggered and we're not getting anywhere. And so we could we could have the fight and it would bring up all the old things and throw all the old crap in each other's faces and end up slamming the door and leaving or whatever, Or we could just walk away for like 10 minutes and then come back together and go, whoa, sorry, I flipped my lid. Let's try that again. I love you. We're on the same team. Okay. Reset.
Yes.
We had this special timer that we had agreed we were going to use in that way, and we never even really had to do it. We just setting the intention really that we had this magic timer that if either one of us felt either that we were dysregulated or that we'd gotten to the point in a conversation that someone was so dysregulated it wasn't productive anymore, either person has the right to go set the timer for 10 or 15 minutes, and that means that's it. Just walk away. No more words allowed. Just stop. Just walk away. It's much harder to do than, easier said than done, because you go, well, just one more thing.
Yes. All the time.
No, not one more thing.
Yep. And then they have a retort and then you have a retort.
Just stop.
Yeah.
It's not going to solve it helps me that I get to watch 3 and 4-year-olds struggle with this so much, right? Because I think a lot about emotional regulation and I get to see ridiculous examples of it. 2-year-olds will get triggered at each other because one will say, my mom, lovingly, and then the other one goes, my mom. And then the first one goes, no, my mom. And then they're pretty soon yelling at each other, clawing each other's eyeballs out. My mom. And you're like, yeah, you both have a mom. Let's take a breath here. Right? But we're all just big kid versions of that, really.
Oh, so true.
My needs. No, your needs. No, my needs.
Yes. Wow.
And so it's helpful to just remember I'm just a big toddler. I have to put myself in a break. So I need to go to the safe place, take some deep breaths.
Yeah.
Get in my best brain where I'm willing to be helpful and not hurtful and move forward.
Yeah, it's tough to do that at the same time as the other person.
Oh, man, it's so hard.
Yeah. Yes, especially because, if you leave a room angry. Because I've been thinking about, have we tried this? Setting a timer or whatever? The getting space? But really, it just gets to a point. It gets to such a heated point where I'm I need space. And I walk away all angry, and then he follows me to the other room. Mm-hmm. And then I'm you're not listening to me. I'm going to freak out. You gotta leave me alone. I'm at the point where this is no longer helpful.
Right.
Yeah, dude. Relationships. How long have you been with Ruth?
We are about to celebrate our 18-year anniversary.
Wow.
We've been together for 18 years, and we've been married for 4.
That's amazing.
On Tuesday.
Why did you wait so long to marry?
Because it was illegal for us to get
Chelsea.
married when
Such an idiot.
because we're gay, and it used to be illegal to get married in this country.
Just 4 years ago?
No, it became legal a few more than that, and we didn't rush into it. When it was gay marriage is legal, we were should we go get married? And then we're no, we're as married as we need to be. No piece of paper makes us more married after more than a dozen years. We've been married in many lifetimes. So who gives a crap about a paper from the people in this lifetime? But then that changed during COVID when we were really fighting concerns if one of us got sick and ended up in the hospital, that the other one wouldn't have the same legal rights to go visit that person as we would if we were a straight couple. And so we decided to put it on paper, and it was actually this exact time of year, maybe to this date, that we decided that. And we were like, hey, my birthday's coming up. Maybe we should do, what'd be a cool birthday present, babe? You want to get married? And she's like, sure. And so in under a week, we planned it, and we just got our best friends, and a couple of whom have kids. So adults and children all together, there were 7 of us, and we hiked out to Youngs Valley and did a hiking elopement and got married in Youngs Valley out in the wilderness, and hiked our backpacks in and out, and hiked in cupcakes. And
oh my gosh, that's so cute.
Yeah. That picture of me I sent you, that's the cover for this podcast. That's from my wedding day.
I love that so much.
That was a great day. Oh, man. That was fun.
What an awesome experience.
Yeah. But 18 years is it. And time is so trippy how it feels like the blink of an eye and also feels like forever. But man, my aunt and uncle just are celebrating like their 60-somethingth wedding anniversary. Wow. And my brother and I were sitting with them recently at lunch on Father's Day, just like to each other. Like, you know, we've both been married for more than 10 years now, my brother and I. Not to,
right.
Not, you know, obvious. Okay. We were just shaking our heads looking at each other like, God, married for 60 years or more. Like, can you imagine being with...
I can't imagine living 60 years.
It's wild to think about how you would relate to a person after being like in it with them for so long. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's some serious freaking commitment. Marriage is not easy. It's not easy.
That's the truth.
But staying with it through the hard times makes it so much more fun.
Yes. Yes. That's when the commitment kicks in, is when it's rough.
Yeah.
Seas. And you're like, okay, well, let's do something about it. Like, we see this issue, let's do something about it. And that's what means a lot to me in our relationship, is it's like, it's never we're going to give up on this. You know, it's always like, here's a problem, let's figure out how to fix it.
Right.
And I was like, that's why I'm going to be married to you for the rest of my life. But also, like, because I think for a while there, we were so codependent. I think we came out of family situations that were troublesome, and I think that's part of like what attracted us together. And then we like developed a codependency as we separated from our families. Mm-hmm. And then it was like way too much. And I'm like, we're like the same person. Like, I can't exist without you. Like, I can't go do something without you, and that's not cool. So we had like a period of individuating, which I think was really important. Mm-hmm. And I think going forward, that's also really important. Like, you should be able to be your own sovereign person and like do things without me and it not be weird. You know, like, well, why is your wife not here? Or why has your husband not done this for you? Like, even doing this radio show and this podcast, like, Malcolm is a music producer and he records and he's like so into music. And so like the station manager knows my husband and is like, you don't know how to do any of this stuff? Like, Malcolm isn't helping you with your waveforms at home? And I was like, man, my husband has his own life. And I don't want him to feel like he has to help me with something because we're a package deal, mm-hmm. you know? And that's been like an interesting thing to navigate recently.
It's taken me a long time to learn that lesson. I feel like my sweetie has come to it more naturally. Like, it was always easier for her to be an independent person. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, that was like offensive to me. Like, I took it like I wasn't, like that meant she didn't love me if she wanted to be her own, you know, if I would say, let's go do this. And she'd be like, no, I'm good. And I'd be like, you
make me do this by myself?
Like, you don't want to do everything together? That means I'm somehow not worthy, or the things I value are not worthy to, you know, like, attached all this meaning to it that is not helpful or true at all.
Oh yeah, and like, it only hurts you.
Yeah, it's really destructive.
Yeah, I've experienced that with my husband because he's so into music. He likes to go to music shows, or he'll go to a friend's house to record music with them, and it's at nighttime. And so he'll just like leave, you know, or he plays basketball, which I'm really happy for him. But there was a point like 2 years ago where I was like, why are you you're leaving all the time and you're doing things for yourself without me, with no concern, you know, like, you don't feel bad. Like, there's no guilt.
Yeah. You should
I have a problem with
feel
that.
bad that you don't want to be with me 100% of the time. I mean, at the bare minimum, have some self-respect enough to feel bad about it.
Yes.
It's so ridiculous.
Yeah,
it is so codependent.
Yeah. I was like, and then finally I took a look at myself and I was like, whoa, this is not cool. Mm-hmm. I have a problem. Like it felt like a betrayal, you know? It was like, oh, you're abandoning me. So what's happening? You're leaving me at nighttime to fend for myself, go and have a good time with people I don't know.
Right.
But now I'm like, I'm thankful for the time we get apart to be individuals. Because I'm like, you got to do your thing. You have interests, you know, and I don't want to feel some sort of resentment. I don't want you to have resentment towards me and me to have it towards you because we didn't allow ourselves the space to be who we are, you know, and it's okay that I don't want to go because when we were in college, like I would go to the house he was going to record music and I would just sit there
Right.
and hang out. And I'm like, what am I doing with my time with myself? I'm not interested in this. This is not a fun time.
Then you probably end up resentful at him for you
Yes.
choosing to spend your time that way.
And I'm like, how effed up is that?
Yeah.
That's no.
The games we play in our mind to my needs.
Yeah, for real.
You know, it's pretty wild. Our brains are so creative how it comes up with ways to fool ourselves
Yes.
about what we're doing.
Yes. And like our inner narrative. And you're just like, you take a step back and you're like, whoa, what story am I really telling myself here? What do I actually feel this way? Mm-hmm. Is this like a trigger for me? Have I been abandoned before? Have I felt abandoned and I haven't dealt with that? Mm-hmm. And so now I'm projecting it on to my husband, just living his life as normal.
That's like the thing, you know, we were talking about a bit ago, how if you don't heal something, you like bring it around to the next experience and you like, you know, you just invent a new archetype of that problem so that you get to work it. And I like marriage is like the most fertile ground for you to take all the crap that went wrong in your childhood or the things that aren't so happy at work or I can only imagine once you introduce a child into it, good Lord, like how you then, you know, have this mirror projection thing on your partner and you, it's like I know personally it's easy for me to do a lot of blaming, you know, all the things that happen that must be her fault. Oh wait, no, that's a me thing once again. Big surprise. It turns out to be my own healing work. That's the
but it gets complicated.
the protagonist of this story
because you're two separate people with two separate pasts. And so it's like you're bringing your stuff and they're bringing their stuff. And it gets intertangled and intertwined. And it's like, well, I have a lesson to learn from this. You have something separate to learn from this. And sometimes I'm way too focused on what you need to learn from this.
I'm really good at that one.
Yeah.
God, I can't imagine what it's like to be polyamorous. Like, hats off how that must I'm like, it must exponentially. Can you imagine having 3 or 4 people's worth of issues?
Oh my gosh.
In a relationship?
Absolutely not.
Props to anyone who's pulling that off.
That's some hard work right there.
That's,
talk about a
beyond
commitment. An emotional commitment. It's like a torture for yourself. Yeah, but with the kids stuff too, I think sometimes it's harder for me with my daughter to see that kind of mirror. I don't know why. Or maybe I just attribute it all to like my childhood stuff because she's a child now. So I'm like, okay, we're reliving some things here. That'll be interesting to see as she gets older. Like, what's going on there. I also learned in my latest conversation with my mom that my grandmother is a Scorpio sun. I had no idea. And now my daughter is a Scorpio sun. And then when I was talking to her, and I find this fascinating because I've been reading a lot about intergenerational astrology and like what you can find from looking down a certain line's charts. And I was like, whoa, that's advanced stuff. Yeah. Like, I'm not quite sure if I'm ready for that. But then when I was talking to my mom, I realized that my moon sign is my mother's sun sign. And her moon sign is her mother's sun sign.
Whoa.
So I was like, I wonder if this goes back even farther. Which I don't have their natal charts, but that would be fascinating to know.
No kidding.
And I was like, what does this mean? Because also I've got the node shift with my daughter.
Right.
So yeah, it's fascinating like maps of people and generations there. And if you spend enough time with it, I'm sure you could like glean something out of that, connect some dots or stars.
No. Well played. My friend Serena really gets the credit for this idea, but we've had this rich discussion before of how amazing it would be if you could, like, if she proposed this idea that she would start documenting, you know, the things that are happening in her life. Like maybe it would revolve around kind of like I don't know, I'm probably quoting you wrong, Serena, but I'm meshing my ideas in there with it too. Like recording down, you know, in your journal, like your full moon intention and, you know, the things you were working on, the themes of your growth and how it corresponds to astrology. If you could like have left that for your kids and then they left it for their kids, like imagine if you could be reading the new moon intentions that your great great grandmother set and like thinking of how, you know, we're all, like we've said, you know, we're just new iterations of these same people echoing through the generations. You know, when we heal something, it's healing it through time and like it's all happening on this quantum level. And so, but if you could like be aware of what kind of stuff was up for your ancestors and just think of how you're, you know,
Draw
like
parallels.
Like you and your mom were talking about how it's uncomfortable for you to say her name, right?
Yeah.
Which is like a pretty fundamental part of someone's identity. But to your daughter, that you're not Samantha, you're mom, right? And like I was just like eating it up listening to you and your mom process all this stuff about your lives and trauma and your family stories, because I could never go to my mom and ask what was up, you know, like tell me about this now that I'm an adult so I can understand it from how I couldn't when I was a kid, you know. And like I'm kind of losing my train of thought because it's all just so like it's just, imagine if you could know what went on for your parents as they were real people, not like they're just your parents, is what I'm trying to say, you know? Like that's one of the things I think I do miss most about my mom, to bring it back to your first question, is like, I don't really, you know, like I said, I wouldn't change a thing, but I would just love to know my mom as an adult, so I could just like sit there and smoke a joint with her and ask her what it was like when she was 20, and or you know, like what were you going through when you were 37, mom, or like when you had this job or this relationship, you know, like to get her perspective on what she was like as a woman, you know, like I never got that at all, and I just kind of barely scratched the surface of it with my grandma. Luckily, I got to know her later into my life. You know, she just died in the last 5 years or so. And, you know, she helped me know a lot more about my mom. But, like, it's so fascinating to me how we don't know our parents as though they're real people. They just are, like, these people who have a role in our lives and are the source of our wisdom as well as our wounding and, you know, all the stuff that we just see them as like a character and not as, but if you could see the lessons they lived, that like the stuff that their astrology was serving up to them to learn from, how could we evolve differently if we could see that differently? Like it takes an incredible amount of like, you know, you'd have to do some real skill building like your therapy thing is having you do, to like sit with your own stuff and see your grown up as a real person. Like there's a lot of weeds to get through to even be ready for that.
Because multiple thoughts come to me because of this, because it's like your parents are your perception of them, which changes, but there's a pretty good solid root of time where like you had a perception of your parents, and even after you move out and you grow up and they've changed because they get older too, you're still like, my parent is this.
Yeah.
You know, and I think parents have that too. Like my mom always thought something of me, you know, and then it would annoy the crap out of me because I'm like, I don't like that now, Mom. You know, that's not my favorite color anymore. It's not who I am.
Right.
You know, so it's like you have a perception of someone and you live your relationship with them through that perception, But yes, it's the turning the awareness on and the consciousness on, because my mom and I had separate healing journeys. And like, it took me being able to heal our relationship from my end, you know, because it takes personal accountability to be like, this is how I'm hurt by you. This is how I feel like I've been hurt by you. And then coming to you and sharing that with you, like that takes a willingness of you to step up and do that and identify that within yourself. And then for them to do the same for you, or for them to be like, because for a while my mom and I were hitting a block where I would be like, this was my childhood experience. And she was like, no, it wasn't. I loved you and I did all these things for you and we had good times. And I would be like, I was a depressed child, which means any time I smiled, I was still depressed. So like, you can't tell me what I lived, you know, but for her, her perspective was different. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure to feel like your child is saying that they don't feel like you loved them is hard to hear. So you're like resistant to that, because in you, you're like, I do love you, mm-hmm. you know, even if I didn't show it right or whatever. So we had that for a long time. And then that played out in our life for a long time. And then finally we were able to get to a point where like, I understand your perspective and I can validate your experience, while also it not being like my truth.
Right.
You know, so like that integration happens when these things happen. I'm like lost my train of thought because I forgot what originally we were talking about. But yeah.
About being able to know your parent like they're a real person.
Yes. Yes. And like after that experience, now I'm like, I'm less triggered by her experience of life, you know, because I think that was a big thing, is like, you weren't allowed to just be a person because you were my world, you know, like you were the earth and my dad was the sun and I was everything on there, you know, but now it's like, okay, you are a separate person from me, and your feelings aren't like a reflection of me. Or like, I'm not responsible for them. Right. So we can have a conversation where I'm not totally triggered by you. Which is, you know, takes time. But yeah. I feel like now I'm finally at a point where even if I am triggered, I can notice that I'm triggered. And I know it's not her. Now I know it's me. Mm-hmm. Whereas I used to think it was her. And mm-hmm. then we'd have a fight about it. And then we wouldn't talk for a long time. Mm-hmm.
I really admire that you guys have committed to doing that work, and that the relationship you seem to have at this moment in time is really beautiful.
I feel that too. And I was even telling her while she was here, I was like, I feel like we're in such a good place. I don't know how you feel. I'd love to know, but I'm feeling real good about our relationship, because it's been tumultuous for the majority of our life together. So we've come a long way and had a lot of terrible, hard conversations. But again, it's like just with my husband, it's like the commitment to going back, which I didn't always have. It wasn't intentional to heal my relationship with my mom, like at all. I was angry, you know? I was angry. I was doing trauma processing, and I like stopped talking to both my parents, because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to cope. So I was like, I can't face you, you know, and I really hurt them by doing that. But at the time I was like, I don't care how you feel. Mm-hmm. I'm in such a bad place. F you. Mm-hmm. And then I had a lot of like asking my mom about the past. And that's a very fortunate thing I'm able to do, with first that she's here, and two, that she's willing to do it. Because I know if I asked my grandmother, she would not be willing to tell me, be honest with me about things. And so, like, I was really grateful to my mom. And I knew it was hard for her, because that's like a reliving of her own trauma. is talking to me about the things that happen as I'm
Right.
trying to piece it together. And so I think that was really rough for her. And then it would be triggering for me. And so then we'd have a fight about it. And we can hold a grudge. Like, we can really be mad for a long time. And we were in one of those spots where we were both mad for a long time after one of her visits. And then finally one day she texted me and was like, I need to see my grandkid and I need to see my kids. And I was like, oh my God, an olive branch.
Once again, the catalyst.
Yes. I was like, okay, can we talk on the phone? I want to talk to you. And then I was like, let me own this. I'm triggered. That's why I'm mean and I'm sorry. And I want to move forward, you know? And then I got something from her I never got before, which was the validation of, I hear your experience and I know that it's different from mine now. And that was insanely healing, I think, for me. I don't know how it was for her, but like, yeah, after that, love having my mom in my life, and I love it when she visits, and I hate it when she leaves. It was so hard to see her leave this time, just because my daughter's older. She's so great with kids. She's so helpful. She's my mom, you know? It's hard to be away from her.
I can only imagine. I live next door to my dad, so that I don't have to experience that very often in my life.
So jealous.
It's pretty rad. It's pretty cool. I mean, you know, it's a huge blessing to get to play such a big role in each other's lives.
Yeah.
On and on as we continue to grow and age.
Yeah.
Both of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't have the same relationship with my dad that I do with my mom now. That's a whole other can of worms over there.
Yeah.
Because they're two different people.
Right.
And it's two separate relationships with two different sets of problems. And I think my mom was really willing to work on herself and is into self-improvement and wants to heal. And I think my dad's a little more resistant to that, understandably. He's more involved in immediate stress and trauma than my mom is too, regarding our family. So it's a tough road for parents.
You got to have the space to be able to do the, you know, it's like the hierarchy of needs thing, right? If you're like in immediate stress, it's pretty hard to want to go back on old stresses and dredge them up and heal them. When you're like, if you're in the midst of the actual one.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to do it when you feel called to do it or when you have the time and space. Otherwise, you're just packing trauma onto trauma. And you're like, now I got to dig farther in and past all the new stuff to get to the root. Yeah, that's a lot. And that's what my mom did. My mom waited till later in life to do all that work. And I'm just thankful that my kid forced me to do it. It's like Pepper birthed me into a new version of myself just by being born.
That time of the world, too, was really powerful. Like, I mean, we all remember it, like, in COVID time, but it didn't actually necessarily have anything to do with COVID, right? Wasn't that right when she was born?
Yes.
Was as the pandemic was beginning?
November 2019, so like 3 months before we saw it on the news.
That whole, I mean, like, it actually... I don't mean to reference COVID, but just like 2019, that moment in time was so, I feel like we are living in a different era for healing and for looking at our wounds and for, like you and your mom talked about how we can all feel our feels now and talk about that in a way that was not even a blip on the radar back in the days when our parents were young, you know, like no one was raised with that of like, oh, you're feeling sad? Well, it's okay to feel sad. That this is what sad feels like, you know, like, and when you're ready, we'll move through, you know, and it was like, if you need, like your mom, if you need to cry, like go cry, keep your feels by yourself. That's not something we do around other people. Yeah. And then nobody ever learns how to do that because you want to be around other people. It's necessary to your survival to feel connected
they, like,
to
shun
them.
you because you have feelings.
Gabor Mate is brilliant. You know, Dr. Gabor Mate's work.
I think so.
It's so good. He talks about how he digs deep into brain science and attachment and ADHD and all the links between how we're cared for by our caregivers and how we process that in our brains and in our relationships forever after. But he talks about this core need as young people to be both attached. Like we all have heard of attachment theory, right? You want to have that secure attachment, but you also have this huge need for authenticity to like be this is like the safety and emotional brain version of conscious discipline is like you feel safe when you're attached to another adult, someone who's going to be there to co-regulate with you when things go wrong, whether that's like a huge trauma, like your parent dies, or like someone stepped in dog poop, or anywhere in between, like someone saw a spider. Oh my God! Like the baby's like, oh, this is what we do when we see spiders. We flip our lids,
right.
Yes. Or they go, oh, it's all right. Let's sing a song about it. Itsy bitsy spider, right? And then you have like a magnificently different pathway in your brain about how you're going to handle this situation. I'm totally going on a tangent. Yes. Where were we?
Love it though.
So part of your brain's need as a child is to be attached to someone who's going to provide that modeling for you of how you move through the moments of the world, good or bad, and it feels safe if you're attached. But then also you have this need to be your true self, to be authentic, to like have your ice cream fall on the floor and you cry about it because that freaking sucks. You were excited about that ice cream and now you're like, and if you're in this era now where we're like, oh, I know that is so disappointing. You were going to eat that ice cream and now it's on the floor. You're like, it's okay to have feeling. Like it's reasonable. I would feel sad and I do feel sad and my person is there with me co-regulating. I can be my authentic self and be attached to this person. And that's like the goal, right? Yeah. But what happened to a lot of our parents and their parents and their parents' parents and their parents' parents was like, your ice cream fell on the floor. Well, you should have held it more carefully. Put on your big girl panties and get in the car. We have to go in. You're fine. I don't want to hear it. Yeah. Right? And suck it up.
No, you're not getting another one. Keep crying. I'll give you something to cry about.
Or the other, I actually watched almost this exact situation when I was out with a friend and her kid, and this kid got a gumball out of the quarter machine, and she kept playing with the gumball on the table, and the mom and me kept saying, like, your big sister put her gumball straight in her mouth. She's chewing her gum. If you want to enjoy that gum, put it in your mouth because rolling it all on the table, it's not a ball, it's gum. Yeah. If it falls on the floor, it's going to be gross, and I'm not going to let you put it in your mouth. Yeah. And what do you think happened? It fell on the floor, and there's that moment where we're all like looking at each other, 5-second rule. We're in a restaurant. No, and so I just like surreptitiously picked up that gumball and slipped it in my pocket. And I didn't make the whole, well, now we have to put it in the trash. It wasn't like rubbing it in her face, but it was just like, oh boy, you were so disappointed. You were really excited about that gumball. You chose to roll it on the table. It fell on the floor. You don't say to the kid, this is logical consequences, but that's the parenting idea behind it, right? Is like, if you choose to do that, this is what could happen. And now let's deal with some disappointment and feel what disappointment feels like. Yeah. And this is a great experience to develop some tolerance for frustration and disappointment, Yes. But then I got to debrief that with the mom later. And what the mom is going through in that moment is like, you want to just make it right for your kid because you love your kid and it's so hard to see them suffer. And what a lot of parents err on the side of, you either are like, suck it up, it's fine, get over it. Or you're like, oh, I know.
Let me get you another one.
Or the other, I'll go get you another gumball. That was such a bummer it's okay, baby. I don't want you to cry all the way home. Yeah. And when you go get that other gumball, you lost in, things happen hard because we learn from them. That's how we learn, is we sit in the discomfort. And that's a really essential part of that too. Anyway, I'm like moving into parenting class lecture mode.
I love it.
But
yes. Tell me more.
But you, like, what I was just trying to make the point of is like, you need to be able to be authentic in your feeling. If you dropped the gumball or the ice cream cone, it's okay to be sad about that. And nowadays we're learning how to hold space for our kids or for other people in that moment and just be empathetic and, And that's like a great chance to practice. Your reality is different than my, the adult in that situation is like, I told you, you should have, like, I knew 10 minutes ago that gumball was going on the floor. Like, you really should have, da-da-da-da-da. And you're just shitting all over them. And then the kid is like, got a whole different perspective on that situation. You're just having fun with your gumball. And then, you're just living in the moment. Like, you don't know.
Something terrible happened to you. And now your parent is like not there for you. Because when you're telling me this and you're, using the term co-regulation and, it's making the child believe that they can have this experience and they can honor their true self. And I'm also like, and your parent friggin' actually loves you and is like gonna help you. So it's like strengthening that connection and that bond. Otherwise you start feeling unsafe with your parent and unsafe within yourself. Like, I can't trust my own feeling. I'm not allowed to feel this way.
Right.
So you're creating mistrust in your body, which is not good.
And these tiny moments over gumballs or ice cream cones are like the blueprints for how we deal with big disappointment. Later you're 13 and your boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with you or something and it feels like the end of the world. And like, and maybe it feels like to some people, I could never talk to my parents about this because they'll be like, suck it up. It's fine. I told you that kid was trash, right?
Yeah.
That's not my experience, luckily, but like I've seen plenty of other people go through that. Ideally, we've like learned to handle disappointment in the small moments. And then it helps us build resistance towards knowing like, the world doesn't always go our way. Sometimes people choose to do things that they don't want to do everything with us, They choose to go play music at night and they don't stay home with us, right? And it's just like, my gumball fell on the floor. Yeah. But this is why it's like we get these little chances when we're kids. But all of this revolves around us as adults being able to like deal with our own stuff so that we can just be there to hold space for kids as they're learning these lessons. And like, this is all actually a really tall order. It's just, you can make it sound simple when you break down one little example.
And it like takes an education, because if you aren't at a point where, you've come into awareness or you're able to switch into that conscious mind, like you have to learn that that's not the way that kids learn best or develop best, because I know a lot of people who would say we do that so that they can become individuals, that they grow up to be individuals, when really it's like the opposite. Like, you gift dependency so that they can learn how to do it on their own. Like, that's something that happens naturally. You hit puberty and you start individuating whether you want to or not. That's not a conscious, I'm going to be an individual, and it roughly, the more that you do what you think is right for creating an effective individual in society is actually hurting them in the long run, because now they have to enter a codependent relationship because they can't regulate on their own because you didn't give them the opportunity to co-regulate with you when it was appropriate developmentally. And that kills me. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
My pleasure, as always.
This concludes the first part of a two-part episode. You can catch the continuation of the conversation next Friday at 3 p.m. PST on the air at KXCJ-LP 105.7 and 101.3 FM or streaming on Spotify. The video recording is always available on our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow Earth Soul Medicine on Instagram at Earth Soul Medicine Podcast and on Facebook at Earth Soul Medicine. Thanks for sharing space with us today. Earth Soul Medicine is brought to you by Veil Voyager, a mystical brand based in Southern Oregon, offering intuitively crafted plant essences, psychic mediumship readings, and all things spiritual self-care, including Portal Planner, a yearly guide for spiritual self-care covering topics such as crystal wisdom, plant spirit healing, and ancient rituals, all aligned with the cycles of the moon. Find out more at www.veilvoyager.com or on Facebook and Instagram at VEILVOYAGER. Ager. Veil Voyager. Seek and you shall find.